Thanks, everybody, for coming in this evening. It's a pleasure to welcome Jeffrey Inaba back to the AA after a short 20-year absence from Bedford Square. And it's always nice to introduce an architect whose current clients include a car company, Coca-Cola, and other companies like that. I think if anybody, any young architect today, embodies the spirit of architecture in a very expanded field of operations, which puts buildings alongside various kinds of strategic projects, the activities of think tanks, publications, mass media, and those sorts of activities. It's really Jeffrey and the work he's been doing for many years now. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Jeffrey now for several years. We've shared various podium and lecterns like this for presentations in recent years, where he has shown the work that he's been doing with Volume, which he does at Columbia University as a director of their C Lab, what's called C Lab there, alongside the work of AMO, which he was involved with for several years as a principal. AMO was set up as the sister company to OMA several years ago, and from 2000 to 2003, Jeffrey was a director at AMO. His interest lies very much in what he's written tonight as the setup for the lecture, is let's say the uncovering of where what we might call value today lies in a field like architecture, and it's described in his title for tonight's talk, which is Seeing Where It Goes. Jeffrey is based in various places. I still can't figure out where he lives. Sometimes it's Los Angeles, sometimes it's New York, and we always seem to meet in Europe, so my sneaking suspicion is he's actually much closer than he lets on. But he is in Los Angeles a significant part of the year, where he's director of the Southern California Institute for Future Initiatives. And the short version of that is Sci-Fi, which is located at the SciArc School in Los Angeles. His interest is very much in strategic planning, cultural research, urban design, and architectural projects as a part of his current firm titled Inaba. His current clients include the New Museum of recent clients include the New Museum of Contemporary Art, the University of Miami, as I mentioned earlier, Coca-Cola, the Nissan Infiniti company, and many others. Jeffrey is, in addition to that, a PhD candidate at Harvard University, which is a school where he did his Master's of Architecture degree several years ago, and is the location where he co-edited a book that you all will know called The Harvard Guide to Shopping in 1997, which students here had a pirate copy of as early as 1996, I'm pleased to report. So I think before it hit the presses, we had the first early versions. And a year later, a book titled The Great Leap Forward, which documents the studio's work in China as a part of that studio in Cambridge. His articles have been published in Arcus, in A+U, and an article in 2003 summarizes the activities and the ideas behind AMO, for any of you who are interested in seeing, in Metropolis, Assemblage, and many other journals. Please join me in welcoming Jeffrey Inaba.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I'm just going to plug this in. Are you getting a video? Oh, we have it. Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, as Brett mentioned, I'm affiliated with a number of different organizations, and have been in the past. And the talk I'm going to give is about taking full advantage of having a number of different places where you could park and do work, and work off of those things off of each other. So Sci-Fi, as Brett mentioned, is the postgraduate program at SciArc. Inaba is the name of the firm that I currently run. At Columbia, there's the Columbia Laboratory for Architectural Broadcasting, Volume Magazine, and in the past, Project on the City and AMMO. And with current work, as well as in terms of prospective clients or potential research projects, it's possible with a client to say, oh, well, maybe that's a thing for a think tank rather than for an office, or vice versa, that it might be a thing where a prospective client is thinking, well, we'd like to do research, and you might be able to say, well, actually that's something that would be ideal for an office to take on and not a think tank, as well as to mobilize your references to say, oh, you know what, in the past I was affiliated with the Project on the City, to give yourself credibility. So the ways that you could use past references as well as deal make with respect to the various entities that you have possible is now an incredibly exciting opportunity in architecture. And it's also possible not to have to distinguish between them. In other words, that at least for myself, there is no agenda in terms of brand distinctions between them, or of a manifesto of what each of these things do with respect to one another. So oftentimes projects that are undertaken in one situation could very well be applied and done in another situation. So that too, I think, is something where at the moment it's more just seeing where it goes. And I'm reading this book about Stalin and the Russian dictator, and it's interesting because, there are accounts where he says, he will do these massive gestures, and then he'll confide later, like, wow, I didn't really expect people to do that. And it's just basically him learning and seeing how it goes. And I'm not saying that the projects that are undertaken here are anything Stalin-like, but it's just to say that when it is possible to use various platforms to work from, you just see what can happen and what results, and sometimes a lot better than you think, and sometimes not as good as you think. And this is just a quick. I opened my office in 2004. And at the end of the year, we didn't really have a lot of work, so I just tried to figure out what was going on with it, and so I just looked at project length and then also how much we were paid per projects. And the ones that you see in green are non-building projects, and then the bars that you see in pink are building projects. So I won't say what the X factor is, but like the one that you see on the the end of November one, it's 160 times more per hour than per week than what we were making on an architecture project. So with that, I mean, it was a thing that reinforced the idea that with sci-fi, with C-Lab, with my own office, that it wasn't necessarily a thing that it would be better to just keep building, trying to do buildings, but that it was almost a necessity to do other things. And furthermore, that there might be more professional opportunities by doing other things than buildings. And then on average, if the final product was a book, it was usually 10 times more profitable than a building. And if the final deliverable was a PowerPoint, it was usually 28 times more profitable. And so, this will, the projects that you'll see are intermixed. So some of them are past projects with past affiliations. Some are current ones with. And they're not in any particular order, except for the fact that I just want to show you that it goes from AMO type projects where a lot of the credibility and a lot of the reasons why we got big name clients was the analytical ability that we had to demonstrate conditions in quantitative terms and to present that back to the clients. So the projects go from that to projects that are just as analytical, but a lot of times they're more emotional in terms of the material that is researched and presented back. So you'll see a progression, or what I hope you'll see is an elaboration of research as well as proposals. So with AMO, we were commissioned by Harvard to do a master plan for them. And what we said is, okay, we'll do a master plan, but can we also propose to you a curricular plan for the university that would be in conjunction with the physical plan? In other words, that a physical plan could be part and parcel of how the university thinks out how it teaches and what material it teaches. On a physical planning level, the big problem with Harvard is that it's in the center of Cambridge, and you've probably seen this before, but it's here in the center of Cambridge, and it's built up all the way to residential fabric that's close by, that's 18th and 19th century homes, so and very expensive 18th and 19th century homes, sort of like Bedford Square. And the big problem having Harvard as your client is they think they're perfect. So it's really hard to be critical of them, or because they'll you'll say, well, you should do this, and they're like, why should we do that? It's fine the way it is. And then if you demonstrate a problem, they're like, well, that's not that bad of a problem because, at the time we did the study, Harvard's endowment was $22 billion, and the next closest was Princeton, which was like $12 billion. And if you just took the Arts and Sciences Department of Harvard, their endowment alone would constitute the third largest endowment of any university in the U.S. So with that, one of the things that we did was we checked their databases, and we just looked at the speed of construction and the cost of construction. So if you just took $2,002, the equivalent of $2,002, in 1900 they could build at about 50 square feet per hour at a cost of about $100 a square foot. But by 2001 or 2002, they were building about 5 square feet per hour at a cost of over $1,600 a square foot. So this resonated with them. So one of the proposal was what we called the Moses scheme in reference to Robert Moses as well as biblical Moses, which was to move the river to like that. Because the big problem was they had amassed a lot of property on the south side of the river surreptitiously. Like they just called themselves different companies, and they bought up a lot of this land here, whereas the original campus is here. So at the current rate of construction that they have right now in Cambridge, they're going to build out within 20 years. Even with all the property they bought in Alston, they're going to build out that side too within 40 years. So a university that's 400 years old, 350 years old is going to see its destiny within 1/12 of its lifespan. This is just some more analysis that we did. These are at the time, the last remaining empty lots on the Cambridge side of the campus, which created what we called a DMZ, a demoralized zone. Meaning that everything that was constructed there was a compromise, an aesthetic compromise, a political compromise, and it came at great cost. And as an example of that, even though some of the zoning allowed for 1:10 FAR, they voluntarily lowered the FAR as a way to appease neighbors. Instead of building up, they started to build down, and as you know, each floor below grade that you build is double the cost of the floor above. So when you get to 7 floors below, it's a lot of money. But they were willing to do that as well as to cap modernist buildings with postmodern tops as a way, again, to appease its neighbors. So this is kind of a resume of a lot of the strategies of coping with the DMZ that Harvard had become accustomed to in their design. So here's an existing building. In this new building here, it's actually lower than the previous building. They dug underground in order to get enough footprint to have program in this new building with a lot across the street. They bridged across to this new to the existing building here, essentially looking the same, but even less so than the original. And this building, it was at $1,800 a square foot at last public account. So the cost of compromise was great. And again, in terms of the river that divides the Cambridge side from the Alston side, most of the student body was on this side of the campus. and in terms of the amount of acres, that it was about equal. So with the scheme, in doing this, what you would get is 160 acres of prime land at the center of their holdings by moving the river. Furthermore, that all the students then would be on the same side of the river, and then this neighborhood here is called Alston. This neighborhood here, where the new river would be, is called Watertown. So in the first time of Watertown's history, they would have a waterfront. But most importantly, at the current rate of growth, with the Moses scheme, with the additional 160 acres, it would mean that Harvard would be able to build for the next 130 years. This is a project that my firm did that is similarly analytical. One of our very first commissions was a book, and it was for an incredibly boring client. It's called the Mayor's Institute on City Design, and basically it's a bunch of mayors who've come into office who realize that they're not only the mayor of the city, but they're also de facto the chief planner of the city. And the idea is to have a conference where these mayors present the city planning projects that they're doing, and they get advice from architects. But these mayors reluctantly go to this meeting, and how much advice that's helpful is really questionable. So what we figured was that we would just make it easy for the mayors and make it about power and about access. So what we did was we Google searched everybody who was attending the conference. We did a closed quotation Google search on the people's names and their titles, and then ordered the book in sequence in descending order of their Google hits. So the person with the most hits went on top, went in the front, and that person, was a city council person in LA. And then also to make it easy, what we did was on the right-hand page, we made it a photo of the mayor or politician so that the mayor could just flip through the book and see on the right-hand page who they're dealing with. We also made it easier in color coding it so that you could also understand party affiliation immediately. Blue for Democrat, red for Republican, as well as high points in their social life. This is another project that we got early on. It was for Nissan Infiniti, which is the luxury brand of the Nissan label. And at the time, their big problem was that they had huge customer satisfaction, but no consumer appeal, meaning that nobody knew what a Q45 was, or an M35, or whatever, any of their car models. But in terms of the customers that did buy the car, it was hugely satisfactory to them, and it was ranked above Cadillac and Mercedes in the J.D. Power and Associates ratings for that year. And so what they wanted us to do was to somehow create more of an interest in the brand for young luxury buyers. One of the big problems we saw was that the Infiniti logo is indistinguishable from other automaker logos, and some of them are economy cars. So one of the proposals was to redo their logo. It was at a time when Renault just purchased Nissan, and so one of the things they wanted to explore was to see if there was a way to integrate old school European values with advanced Japanese technology. So one of the things we proposed was pinstriping, in that the pinstriping would refer to old school craftsmanship, but it would take Japanese technology to create parallel lines over a multi-surface curve. Also, as a way to integrate old with new, we proposed elements for the interior. The engine is, looking under the hood is basically an obsolete chore now because of the way that engines work. They work really well. They don't need repair. And if they do need repair, you can't do it because it's all electronic. So what we said is don't sacrifice that real estate on a car. Make looking underneath the hood a vanity thing so that when you open up the hood, you can look underneath the car and enjoy your engine. And that a mirror might also do well, and that you could look at yourself looking at your engine. So this is the postgraduate program at SCIARC. We're supposed to be doing urban design and policy thinking. A a lot of times we just make T-shirts and photograph ourselves wearing T-shirts. But other times we do other stuff. We do workshops, and the workshops are sometimes with video makers, sometimes they're with exhibition designers, with theorists, with artists, which are the worst because you never know what's going to happen. But with this, it was a couple of architects from Europe who are now affectionately called the Euros at SciArc. And they said that that within a week that the sci-fi people need to design and build a house, a mock-up of a house. And by day 3, the sci-fi students were still theorizing the house. And so they said, well, forget it. Day 4, show up at 9 o'clock and we'll just start making a house. So in the center is the house that was built in 3 days instead of 7 days. And what it is that they just went on site, got a whole bunch of PVC, and just started to make things with PVC. And of course, after it was built, we played a video of the construction of the house, which you could see there. And then, I mean, the great thing about it was that also then afterwards, because we had bought the stuff within a week, we were able to return all the materials back to Home Depot. And then we did a workshop with Doug Aiken, who's an artist, and he had a book launch in Los Angeles, and he got a lot of people to be there, a lot of famous artists, and then, you know, in his incredibly seductive way, he said, oh, you know, why don't your sci-fi students help out? It'll be a great collaboration. Meaning that some of them took tickets at the door, other students had to valet, but one group actually got to build something, and these are these giant inflatable seating things, which I think Hermes wants to now buy and produce. This is a project that my firm did. We were hired by the Central Business, the Business Association for the Loop in Chicago, which is right in the center of Chicago. And as you know from architectural history, the Loop in Chicago has more modern architecture per square foot than any district in America. And so we're really surprised when we got a call from this business district asking us to create an identity for the Loop. You know, he said, well, why do you need an identity? You're the Loop. But they did, and part of the reason is that that North Michigan Ave here is a retail street, and the Loop was losing retail dollars to North Michigan Ave. Moreover, the new Geary complex is here, and this because it is a big destination, they were concerned and they want to compete with those two entities. So having access to the Geary Bilbao view was critical in their mind, so we just said lift up the L and be done with it. But instead, what we proposed was that they merged with the area to the north, that they combined forces to become one single business district, which they did. And then we proposed different itineraries for walking around the new combined area, which incorporated the Geary complex, making infinite loops within the loop. And then also we proposed specific kinds of loops, like Girls' Night Out, Married with Kids, of different destinations that you could go to in the loop. The big problem is that the elevated train that defines the loop is seen by this business association as a negative thing, that people don't want to go underneath it and into the loop because of the noise of the elevated. They think that it just automatically produces crime. And so there is a new technology to build to grow plants upside down with very little water and hardly any sunshine. So we proposed landscaping the loop, but from below the L, and this way it also wouldn't interfere with traffic. So they're working with the MTA now to implement this. This is the cornucopia scheme for Thanksgiving. But the big problem, it turned out, wasn't North Michigan Ave, that other shopping street. It turned out that it wasn't enough for them. They said that they were happy with the contemporary affiliation with the Geary complex, but in fact the retail dollars weren't being lost to North Michigan Ave. All the people were shopping in the suburbs, and so what we proposed was, what we did was we looked at retail streets throughout the world. This is State Street, this is North Michigan Ave. Right now, Champs-Élysées is the longest at almost 1.25 miles. So what we proposed was to connect North Michigan Ave and State Street to create the longest continuous shopping experience in the world. And that would be linked by a bridge, and that by having this bridge here, it would create a new center within Chicago. Here's Millennium Park, here's State Street, here's North Michigan Ave. The Navy Pier is over here. The MCA Museum is here. The Art Institute is here. The new Trump building goes here. So they liked it. The mayor liked it a lot, and so the mayor took it away from the business association and claimed it as his project. So he's doing it now, but he's stalled because he has 2 federal indictments against him that he has to deal with first. Another big concern with this central business district area was that they want to have people live there, and they don't want to just have college students live there. They want to have a big range of people, like empty nesters, couples in their 30s and 40s, and families. So we did a study of a series of photos of beds, of different kinds of beds. And we proposed then that they would be put onto the buildings in the area as a way to suggest that beds in this area belong to different people than just college kids. This is another poster that is throughout the area called Love in the Loop, and is about different places to make out in the loop. This at SCI-Arc, we're doing research, but we're thinking out the way that research is done. So unlike shopping and Pearl River Delta, we're thinking of doing research in the form of a guidebook, research disguised as a tour guide. And the idea is called Alibi. That is that, like, it's particularly for people like architects who might be traveling a lot more, but not being able to see cities as much because they're there on business. And so the idea is, if you're like, another continent, you're on business, you only have 3 days in a place, that you just say to a colleague on one afternoon, my stomach's not feeling so well, I think it's something I ate, I'm just going to go back to the hotel. You guys go to the next meeting and I'll catch up with you afterwards. With that alibi, you can look at this alibi and look for information about a place. And the first one, which is going to come out in the next volume, is on Rio de Janeiro. Rio is an aspirational city in every way. And one of the ways it's aspirational is even its favelas, its slums. And we focus on Rosina, which is the largest favela in Rio. And it's an example of a model for development for favelas in the third world. So we call it a 5-star favela in the parlance of tour guides, and describe the attributes that it has that makes it an effective, growing, self-sustaining community. When it floods, because this favela is on a hillside, when it floods, raw sewage comes down the street, and basically, like, the people who live there have to clean raw sewage off the street. Also, in this particular favela, there is one municipal road, and that municipal road has water drainage, but none of the other roads are municipal, so there isn't any drainage. So, of course, there's a backwash of water when it does flood, and you see these fountains that come out of the streets. Also, in terms of, because it is on a slope, there have been informal attempts to concrete the slope as a way to prevent heavy rain runoff. Also, we looked at the ways in which things are designed and improvised in the suburbs. The makeshift plumbing is above ground in the form of PVC pipes. and this is some of the construction stuff. Another thing that we're doing at SciArc is we looked at Palm Springs. It's the only city that I know that has an intersection of Bob Hope and Frank Sinatra drives. And by the way, there's nothing there. It's an empty lot. This is the downtown of Palm Springs. It's a shopping mall that's been boarded up for 10 years. It has tourism, but the tourism that it has is not necessarily the tourism that it wants. That now it's blurred into a suburb of Los Angeles. Because it isn't the kind of Hollywood destination resort that it was in its glory years, it has welcomed subcultures. So one of the biggest, it's called White Weekend. It occurs over Easter weekend. 10,000 gay men descend onto Palm Springs. Also, the infrastructure reflects its embrace of subcultures. This is a bridge that crosses one of the main areas in Palm Springs. It belongs to a nudist colony which owns property on both sides of the main street. So, like, the height right here is 6 feet, so that people could walk across naked without causing traffic jams. So we met with the mayor and the chief economic officer, and we proposed to study Palm Springs as an academic study. One of the projects looked at, this is Palm Springs here, this is LA here, this is the Mexican border, and this is the Salton Sea. The Salton Sea has a salinity level that is twice the salinity of the ocean. It's incredibly salty, and it's also dead. Very little grows in it. And it's an environmental time bomb waiting to happen in terms of the effect of the water for agriculture in the area. The area right below the Salton Sea is used for agriculture. So one of the students found that that over the years, what would happen naturally is that the Gulf of California would connect with the Salton Sea. So their proposal was to dig a channel to connect the Gulf of California with the Salton Sea, and then connect it with the Colorado River and circle it down. And in effect, what it would do is that the seawater here would dilute the water in the Salton Sea, that water then could be pushed down the Colorado River, and the diluted water could be used for agriculture in this area, like that. This is the existing Salton Sea, and the idea would be that in connecting with the Gulf, you would also flood Palm Springs and decrease the footprint of Palm Springs as it is now. So this is their proposal for that. And that each nudist colony would then be able to have its own island, which we presented to the mayor and the city council. And it happened to also be the night where the police department was trying to get more funds, so the entire police department was there too at this meeting. This is another project that we did. It's a sea reclamation project, and like carbon banking, where some countries, if they emit a lot of carbon dioxide, they can carbon bank. They can get credits from a country that isn't emitting a lot of carbon dioxide, and they pay money to the latter country. It turns out now that there are a lot of countries throughout the world that are doing land reclamation, that they're building out into the water. And for example, in the case of Hong Kong, it's 100 times more profitable to reclaim land than it is to redevelop. Instead of displacing people in the center of the city, it's more profitable for them to build out into the ocean, even though it costs a lot more. In order to maintain the 70% water, 30% land ratio of the world, the idea would be that South Korea would become a land bank. So every time a country extended out into the water, that South Korea would reclaim ocean. So the existing footprint of South Korea is this. And so their proposal was to effectively reduce the footprint of South Korea to this. And that the figure would be in the shape of Asian emoticons, which we're going to publish in a book called Culture. At Columbia, we have this thing called the Columbia Laboratory of Architectural Broadcasting. One of the first things that we did there was we did research on the book, and architecture books are on the decline, and architecture books that had the word modern architecture in it took a really big hit in the 80s, and this was all based upon the index of books at Avery, which is the largest architectural library in the U.S. And we counted all the academic publications in the U.S. Since 1975 to 2003. And you can see, even with the ease of being able to publish nowadays, publications, the book form basically had its peak in the mid-90s. And now the number of books that are being published overall and in architecture is decreasing. So the mediums are evolving, and that's something that we want to announce, is the decline of the book as the principal form of engagement in architecture. And that there are, on the contrary, other forms that use architecture that are printed that have a lot more exposure than architectural books. So this is, in terms of area, in printed pages, the Franching Architectural Graphics is the most sold architecture book out there. This is the area of a FIFA soccer pitch, and this is the amount of area of euros that are in circulation in the world. And the euro, by far, is the most prevalently printed architectural matter out there. So, as you know, on one side of the euro, there's a bridge, and on the other side, it's either a gateway or a threshold, as you can see here. And it's by periods. So the 500 note is modern. The 50 note is Renaissance, and the 5 note is Roman. And the European Monetary Index Institute kind of got it right in terms of circulation. The value of the 500 note is the greatest, and in terms of the amount of bills in circulation, that the Renaissance period is the most in terms of number of bills. And another issue we did was on leaks, and what we did was looked at information leaks, but also environmental leaks. And what we're trying to do is to combine analysis with more elaborate graphics. So here's an example of an inventory of different leaks in the world, environmental leaks like Chernobyl, Katrina, Valdez, Love Canal. So the radius of the blue circle shows the distance of its environmental impact, and then the magenta dots show the number of deaths per leak. What we're also doing with C-Lab is that we're not just doing printed stuff. What we're doing is we're commissioning video artists to produce short videos, which we're printing in volume, and then we're broadcasting off of our website. My office was commissioned to do an exhibition on the influence of sports on fashion and art. And one of the things that we found in the initial research that we did is that sports is a really important subject to a lot of people, to the point where an ingrown hatred for someone else could be developed on the level of sports at a very, very early age. And that kind of passion is something that occurs with only a few things in this world. And that the passion for sports is something that goes on in terms of how it's executed in the built landscape. This supposedly is a used soccer pitch. Sports also has a political dimension, that it's used as a form of diplomacy, as well as a form of protest. This is the '68 Olympics in Mexico City, and these are American athletes. So in the research that we did, we looked at a lot of statistics, because sports is a lot about the numbers of sports, of the timing of getting running a race in less time, or the performance or the scores in a match. But in addition to those numerical data that's out there, what we did was we simply did an inventory of expressions of people winning. as well as expressions of people losing. And so we just inventoried and made a book for ourselves of winners and losers. As well as cheaters. This woman was crowned the women's winner of the 1971 Boston Marathon. Her name's Rosie Ruiz. It was found out afterwards that she only ran the last half mile. We also looked at athletes turned lawmakers and athletes turned lawbreakers. So that's Al Unser Jr. on the right. On your right, that's his mugshot for drunk driving. We're also now going to do a thing for volume on athletes turned lawmakers and then turned lawbreakers. And so we also did the wayfinding graphics for this exhibition. We looked at camaraderie in sports, basically the body contact and affection in sports, and then we applied different patterns onto these silhouettes. So the proposal was to have these as giant plywood pieces inside the space that would have jersey colors on one side and then the information of, like, you know, this way to the toilet or this way to see, you know, the football exhibition or whatever. But then we proposed that instead of having information on the other side, that we would just have a lot of muscle. And we also designed the book. So this was one proposal for the book cover. And the idea is that the book would be like a sports almanac, that you could thumb through it and look at it like a handbook on sports with facts on sports. But in this case, it would be not only sports, it would be about politics, art related to sports, and fashion influenced by sports. So this is the final cover. It's on sale in the UK. And it's pretty cheap. So this is the exhibition space. It's an old train station. It's about 25,000 square feet, or 2,400 square meters. And what we proposed was to make a tube that was 11 meters in diameter and 110 meters long. And to have that be like a stadium, like an enclosed space in which elements would be displayed. You know, and inside there would be small rooms, or what we called stacks, that would display the art, and then on the outside would be clothing and fashion. So this is the tube. So yeah, it turned out to be 10 meters in diameter. And it's made out of perforated metal, and it's 120 meters long. There were about 15,000 articles of fashion that were included in the show. Everything from Alexander McQueen to Vivienne Westwood to Chanel to Gucci, blah 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 blah, to Harley Davidson and Champion. There were like 600 shoes, 100 skate decks, 50 biking helmets, 200 soccer balls, just a lot of stuff. And so these stacks, what we call stacks, were made out of common materials that you would see in sporting structures. And then also what we did along this tube was we made what we called a continuous winners podium on the left-hand side here, which would have mannequins that were also gold. So the idea would be that with these gold podiums, everybody would be a winner. And you know, working with it was shown in Florence, and working with Italians is really great because we had like 8 months to do this show, but it really came down to the last 2 weeks of putting this together. And it came off really well and was really, really well detailed, I think, you know, in terms of what well considered on their part. But it's amazing just how intense it could be. So it turned out that some of the clothing that they got wasn't the regular size 2 for modeling. it was a size 1, so they would be out there with X-Acto blades chopping off the hips of mannequins. So you can see there at the bottom the pieces of mannequin that used to be part of this mannequin there. So this is the space. These are some of the decks. Alexander McQueen designed American football padding. So the idea is on the left it's fashion, on the right it's artwork, and that it ends in a 40-meter projection. I mean, no, a 30-meter projection of the video that's at the end of the tube. These are great. This is by an artist who puts masks over soccer balls, and you can kick these masks. So there's Bush here, and these other people are. And you know, like a lot of the publication work that we do, which uses compare and contrast of images, what we tried to do was to create scenes within the space that do the same thing but three-dimensionally, like folks after a football game next to fashion victims. This is a really great piece by Patrick Tutafoco. It's a bike. Some of the juxtapositions of the video with the fashion. Evidently in Italy, they don't use athletic cups when they play soccer. So they didn't know what these things were. So they approved it early on in the project. But then they installed them dutifully, even though when they found out what they were. But when they were installed, we told them that they were used athletic cups, which they didn't really think was very funny. This is really beautiful. These are Chinese soccer balls made in China, and on the back side, they're handwritten with pencil, the makers of each of the balls. Just different artwork. Okay, this is a project that my firm is doing. It's a house in Costa Rica, and the people who we're doing it for, they're really into environmentalism. I mean, I care about the environment, but I mean, we all should care about the environment, yes. But when we started it, and they said they wanted to be very environmentally conscious, we just said, huh? What exactly does that mean? But we tried, and we're working with AirUp in LA, and we're trying to make it environmental. So the house has a couple of components. One is this air funnel here, what we're calling an echo chimney, and then the house has primarily 2 different working studios for the clients, one for her and one for him. And this is the proposal, and basically cool air comes in through here, and then it goes up this it creates a Venturi effect, and the cool air rises upward, and it collects the hot air in through here and pulls it up. So it's a natural form of ventilation. This is the back side of the house. So here's the vent in the front view, side view. And so, it's like, I think it's like 10 feet high. It's pretty big. It's really, really big. Here's the view from inside of it. This is the back side. So, this is a main floor where you have views out. It has other stuff like it collects rainwater. There's a wind turbine on the top of this, and apparently a wind turbine helps the air go through. But just a basic, standard energy-producing wind turbine produces way more energy than solar panels would if solar panels were arrayed over the entire house. Here's a side view. And so the view from below. And so also to make it environmental, we're using hemp or marijuana. It's not legal in the U.S., but you could use hemp as a building product in Costa Rica, where this house is located. So the insulation of the house, it's going to be out of concrete, but then we're going to use hemp as an insulation material for all the walls. It's really, I mean, it's cheap, and the R value is really high. And so this is how it works, is that the cool air comes up, and then in one state, what you do is you close all of the shades of the house. So in the evening, the cool air collects here, and then in the morning, the cool air rises, and you keep the shutters closed, and it circulates in through here. And what Arab suggested also was to put a whole bunch of huge boulders in through here, because it creates more coolth. It creates more mass for there to be more coolth. And then the second phase of the house is that you open up, when the air gets too hot, you open up the windows and you circulate the air out. So when we were doing this, we said, well, we're saying to Arab, so basically you're saying that this works like a bong. The air that you store, like you think of the cool air like smoke, that you store, the smoke in through here, and then once you've had enough, you just let it release it, right? And one guy from Arab said, a bong, what's that? And another guy from Arab said, yeah, exactly, it works like a bong. So for the clients, we made a bong to show how the system works. And so here it is. This is where you put your marijuana. The air comes in through here, then it circulates in through here. There's a water reservoir here where the water would be for the water runoff, and then you inhale there. And it works really well. We caught one of our employees taking a break the other day. So you see the warm air, or the cool air turning into warm air. It is stored in through there, and then the air is sucked out, or the smoke in this case is sucked out. Happy employee. This is a proposal that we did at SciArc. It was for a competition for the MAC, which is a Schindler House.
Will it be possible to appreciate the Schindler House?
It was for a competition for the Schindler House in LA, which is owned by the Museum of Applied Arts in Vienna. And basically what they proposed was for a bunch of architects in LA to do a vertical wall on one side of the Schindler House, because there was a condominium that was going up next to it. And what they wanted to do was to create an architecture of resistance by putting up a vertical garden. And instead of creating an architecture of resistance, what we proposed was to not put up a wall, to not design, in fact, because basically, everyone that entered the competition responded like Pavlovian dogs. Like, everyone knew that it wasn't going to be built, but everyone designed something anyways, not really considering what the political dynamics of the situation was. So the MAC Center in LA in the US is one of the oldest extant structures to house architecture. So if you take MoCA, MoMA, the Whitney, MCA in Chicago, MAM in Miami, the Graham Foundation, or except for the Graham Foundation, the MAC is the oldest existing modern architectural building that displays architecture. And so what we proposed was not to put up a wall, but to show the authenticity of the house. And that when things need repair in the future, to take down the walls of the house to expose it even more, and in that way creating once-in-a-lifetime opportunities where you could see the material construction of the house would be on display, and you would get a sense of Schindler's original sense of composition of interior and exterior spaces. So in that sense, what we did was we illustrated the house with different parts of it taken down so you could see through it, creating even more of a transition between interior and exterior spaces than was there before. But in that sense, I mean, what we thought of it as as a Matta Clark in reverse, that if you take Gordon Matta Clark's work, where he took old buildings and made holes in them, that it was essentially a way to deal with entropy, that you would temporarily activate vacated dead buildings by producing new spaces. Whereas with the Mac, what we tried to do was to do something that we call hypertrophy. In other words, that we would temporarily activate existing buildings and expose their spaces to new, to their original spaces, not to new ones. This is a proposal that we were commissioned by Axe Body Spray. Do you know what Axe Body Spray is? Yeah, so basically these two Midwestern 30-year-olds came in from Chicago, and we worked with the ad agency, and they said, our client group is 16 to 18-year-old boys. What we want to do is start to get 14-year-olds to 16-year-olds interested in Axe Body Spray, and that the objective of the product should be that the 14 to 16-year-olds think that they're going to get laid. So that's what we had to work with. They didn't have a scent in mind. They didn't have, all they wanted was a product that would be appealing. And that it would be something that was a little bit more upmarket, that would sell for about $25 rather than about $8 in the US. Essentially a cologne rather than a deodorant. And the amazing thing about Axe is that it's a deodorant without being an antiperspirant. So you still sweat, it just covers the smell. So this is one of them. And this is the final one that we proposed to them, called ODAX. We'll see what happens with that. This is a project that we're doing for the new museum. This is the second to last project. And this is the Sejima building that's going to be the new building for the new museum in New York. And we were asked to look at a number of residual spaces in the interior. Basically, spaces that no one's going to see, and that they're spaces, because they're not on the primary circulation route, they're also not next to each other. In other words, it would be difficult to create a visual sequence using these spaces because they're disjunctive with one another. And the difficult thing was that it had to be graphic, but because they didn't have a lot of budget, it had to be up for a year. So those were three incredibly difficult constraints for us. Like how could you create something that is going to get a little visibility, that's discontinuous, and would have to be somehow fresh after 9, 10, or 11 months. So here are some of the things that we came up with. For the lower space, what we proposed was a donor wall, where the primary thing would be an optical effect of these different spheres. This is one wall, the ceiling, and another wall. And it's not literally the donors to the museum, but just people who have a lot of money in the world, like paramilitary organizations, universities, politicians, but also things that are random, like the cheese business. The swine business is huge. And then on closer inspection, we modified each of the ovals so that quantitatively they describe the relative value or net worth of each of these organizations. A big question with the programming for the museum, a big question today is whether or not geopolitics still matter. In other words, that if there are countries in the world that were important to the U.S. or to the Middle East or to the former Soviet Union because of where they were located, do geopolitics still really matter? I mean, like, can places be valuable, but not for strategic geographical reasons, but purely in terms of, say, their labor force or the way in which resources can be transported somewhere else so that strategically it's not exposed. If geopolitics still do matter, the stands are going to be really, really important. That is Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, et cetera, because the stands are in between the Middle East, China, and Russia. And they're natural gas resources as well as oil resources. So what we proposed was a stand stare that simply made people aware of the strategic importance, if geopolitics still matter, by just describing various statistics about the stands, population, internet use, et cetera. And this would go into a stairwell that's about 4 feet wide and about 30 feet high. This is just a sequence of going through the stair. And this is another one that again, is statistical, but what we try to do with this is look at things that were much more elemental, like things that we eat as humans, things that we don't eat, and things that eat us, and just measured their lifespan across the stair. And I hope this works. No. Oh, that was an animation of the thing. And then finally, this is a thing that we proposed for them too. If you chew gum, supposedly it keeps you awake, it stimulates your mind, and it activates brain waves. And so we proposed using gum as a medium. This is a gum street somewhere in the U.S., in California. And what we proposed was to put gum on the sidewalk in front of the museum, and that the size of the gum would correspond to the brain activity that it would create proportionally. So Asper gum apparently has caffeine in it, so it stimulates your brain more than regular gum. Cinnamon gum also stimulates your brain more than regular gum. And then some had negative factors like Nembutal. And these are just people who've taken their stickers from the museum after they've left the museum, and they leave them near the museum. So what we propose is that the ticket be a stick of gum and its wrapper, and that you would get this once you entered the museum. You probably know about this. I didn't know about this like measuring stick gum. So it's like 6 feet of gum. So this would be a value pack. Like if you're there with friends or a family, you would just buy this instead of the individual one. And the idea would be that on the lobby wall, while you enter in the museum, and when you leave, that you would use the gum wrapper and put it on the wall, and that the museum could use it as a way of voting and taking opinions on things. And that people could do that. So they sort of liked the gum, but they weren't sure. And so what we did after the fact, not during the process of the project, but after the fact, we researched gum and just looked at gum in New York and the composition of gum. And so we just looked at different buildings in New York, and that the value of a building has as much to do with how much it's maintained as the cost that goes into the original construction. So we just looked at well-known buildings in New York and looked at what their sidewalks look like. This is the Empire State Building. This is Lever House. They've got gum. They've got a gum problem there. The Sullivan Building on Bleecker Street. I mean, it's just totally amazing, this detail here with the column. I mean, but they've got a gum problem too. The UN building. This is Seagram's. This is the only piece of gum we could find on the travertine. So what we've done after the fact is we're going to bring this information to the attention of the client, but we're also going to publish it in Volume magazine as a piece on gum architecture. And then, so lastly, just some things on, not to end on a building, but as a way to circle back some of the information that we generate and do. Here are some things in Volume magazine. This is an analysis of the past 10 Pritzker winners, and it's the official dress code in architecture is the casual, that there's only one tie among the last 10 Pritzker winners. And that you could do that kind of analysis, but also to be that you could be serious about it in a way that you could create potential figures, or at least people with potential powers, like created avatars where there is stalemates within the world, a kind of do-it-yourself kit of potential people or leaders in the world, like a Saudi echo dictator in the Middle East. A pope that believes in science, a human rights war journalist, a surgeon general that believes in wellness. This is a thing that we did on power, and when you think of power, you think of China, you think of the U.S., you think of EU, and what we said was, well, one place where power in a different way should be explored is in South America, and then we proposed different types of nation-building activities for those nations. And then again, as a way to loop back or to integrate, the alibi thing, the thing on Rio, the tour guide is going to be published in the next volume magazine. And then lastly, Volume, it's a great magazine. It's been really fun to work on, and it's super exciting. And for a long time, it was Arcus magazine, and the part of the reason why we're collaborating now is that that Arcus lost some of its funding from the Dutch government. But the interesting realization was that for all the time that it was Arcus, they weren't really market savvy. They didn't really have a lot of advertising, and so now we're trying to generate more advertising in Volume magazine, but we haven't had a lot of luck so far. So again, as another form of improvisation within the profession, what we're doing is that we're advertising friends of ours' businesses at an extremely discounted rate. So these are a couple of the advertisements that friends got in for favors. Thank you. Thanks very much.
So take some questions?
Yeah, sure. Love to.
Okay. Questions in the audience? Don't be shy. Please. I think one thing I've always wanted to ask about the work is the degree to which you all might look back on, let's say, careers like the Eames, or let's say a period in high modernism where the extension of built and architectural projects into the operations that, for example, the Eames office associated themselves with, some of the Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
Is there any of that kind of research that in effect also looks on your own activities in relation to a kind of modern project, or is it pretty much just focusing on clients, briefs, and things that come in?
I mean, again, the thing that was really interesting about working at AMO was that that a lot of the clients were, we just benefited from the tail end of the tech boom. And a lot of the clients had a lot of money. They didn't know what to do. They were dealing with a changing world, and they just wanted information. Whereas, I think at the tail end, or the transitional moment of AMO, that a lot of the work focused on NGOs. So it was really interesting to see how AMO could take on a political dimension. It wasn't super market driven. And with our work, we do not take clients as well as take other clients and not make very much money. But I think a lot of it right now is not that it's not self-reflective at the moment. We're just, in that sense, seeing where it goes. That I think we're just using this period as a period of a few years to see what our powers are, where we don't have powers, and I think from then figure out if it could be applied to a bigger project, or that we might find out that after a couple of years that we might be doing a bigger project that we don't really realize at the moment. So, in that sense, that's how we're taking it.
What's the name of the consultancy network that you work with? I'm just curious to say.
Yeah.
Is it involved working with advertisers, graphics people, et cetera, or do you, as architects, do you take on that?
Yeah. I mean, the beautiful thing about the advertising world is that it's really a black science, and so the great thing that the clients say to advertising people is that half of it is bullshit, but if they only knew which 50% was bullshit, they would save a lot of money. So working with advertising agencies has been really interesting and fun, but it is a thing where they get strategy, they get interesting ideas. But where it goes, it's really a thing that's difficult to channel, and I think it in that sense, not all ad agencies are equal, and you'll find some that are super exciting to work with, and others that you decide that you just it's not interesting on that level, on an intellectual level. Yeah.
Questions?
I think also a thing to know is that it's not like I went to school thinking I would not do architecture as buildings per se, it's something that I just sort of fell into, and I think, for you all, the interesting thing is that after you graduate, you could see where it goes in the sense that opportunities can arise, that you can be suddenly start to do something for a couple of years and have a degree of expertise in it that allows you new options while you're still being an architect. And I think that's just in terms of being reflective at the moment, the potential of what we do.
What really stands out in it is the way you kind of reverse the diagram that we would know as architects and that we're used to as a discipline, having a collaborative network that are effectively consultants to us. But what you seem to be mining in a really interesting way is a kind of reversal, where in fact your activities could potentially become a consultant to either the agencies that you're working with or the kinds of government authorities that you're setting up.
Yeah.
It's no longer a one-way kind of path.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. Like with the sci-fi stuff, what we're doing is we're not doing master plans, we're doing country plans. And the idea is that we would be consultants to countries rather than being in the service of countries to execute a master plan or to execute an already predetermined program, that we would be part and parcel of teams that would define what the scope of development would be and what the program would be. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Ed. Thanks. Appreciate it.